reason for that is the pocket gophers in particular are difficult to locate, particularly from the surface. And even though you may see burrows, they may be there, they may be near the surface, they may be above the surface, or they may be below the surface, probably below the surface. But it's so hard to find them that, for instance, the Thurston County HCP says if you have prime gopher soils, you have to assume that they might be anywhere in there. So that's with the streaked horn lark, yeah. With the streaked horn lark, if you stay out of their, go ahead, I'm sorry, I don't mean
Well,
to.
to show my ignorance from a layperson standpoint, and there are documents in here discussing the pocket gophers. Am I correct? Am I correct in assuming they migrate and move similar to moles that you find in urban areas? Underground?
I don't believe that they went, in my reading of the pocket gophers, I've just read a couple of the species reports and the recovery plans coming from U.S. Fish and Wildlife and WDFW. My interpretation of those is that the pocket gophers actually they form networks, and they sort of branch out from those networks, but they can go in underground and they yeah, and they stay there. They stay there year round. I think that they become they don't move around very much and they don't during the winter, but they are present there. That's where they hang out. And that they basically when they breed, the new guys create sort of branches in, I don't know how you would say this, kind of in a sort of in a star pattern, for instance. They sort of, they can go out in any direction and they create new tunnel sets for themselves and they create multiple tunnels. Some of them are for food, some of them for waste, some of them for living space.
I have another question that may be beyond what I'm supposed to be ruling on, but if at this stage, or let's say some other phase of future development, there was a consideration of possible impacts on any of the three species you discussed. Is it your view that, and I realize you're not a legal expert or an ecologist, but is it your view that that discussion could include compensatory or offsite mitigations? Because you touched on this, I think, with regard to one of the species, for other sites to compensate for development at this site.
Yes, that's how I understand this mostly works, is that they get, when they think there's going to be species take, this is how the Thurston County HCP works. When there is expected take of listed species, they pay mitigation fees. And then the county uses those mitigation fees to purchase lands that are, for instance, prime gopher soils or prime habitat, and restores them and then maintains them in perpetuity, and then they do the translocating of the species to those sites so that they can save the species even though not at the original site.
Right. Thank you for the answer. I don't want the parties to think I'm leaning one way or the other on the appeal, but I'm just curious about that. Ms. Newman, do you have any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Norton.
No, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Mr. Anaker, did my questions cause you to want to ask another question or so?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Had
good.
to think about it.
Yeah, I know, that's fine. I'm glad you gave it some thought. Ms. Norton, I think we're done with your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, we're at 3:20. I was hoping we wouldn't go until 4:30 today, but well, who is going to be our next witness, Ms. Newman?
Mr. Bill Vogel.
And I'm guessing he's going to take, how long do you think he's going to take?
I think it would be.
Not long how he's going to take. How long will the lawyers and I make him take?
You mean direct and cross?
Yeah.
I suspect an hour and a half with both direct and cross, but I can't predict how long cross will take.
Well, I want to move on, but I don't want to, if either of you, or your colleagues need time today, I'm willing to consider that. What's your preference, to proceed with him and go as long as we need to? I'm asking.
I am fine with not proceeding and putting him on tomorrow morning. I am fine with proceeding. I don't have a strong, if you have a, I understand if you have a decision to write, I would have no problem, giving you that opportunity.
Well, I can adjust my time, but
Okay.
Mr. Anaker, do you have a preference? Would you rather proceed and get as far as we can? And even if we finish with direct, I suppose we could have him come back tomorrow morning for cross.
This is Chris Pierce, right? I'm not opposed to splitting up the direct and cross examination. It seems like if we take an hour, that gets us a little bit short of your goal for direct. That seems appropriate to me, to try to do that.
Right. Does that work for you, Ms. Newman?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's proceed with him then.
Okay.
Let me grab his resume. I had it this morning. Now I don't know where it is, but
Mr. Examiner, this is Zach. This is Zach Griefen. I just wanted to note, I get an alert popping up that says recording not saved in the Teams meeting. I'm not sure what that means, but certainly we'll want to listen to the recording or view the transcript later.
Sean, do you know the status of this saving the recording? I think it is actively recording.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gilbertson has to take this on.
Maybe we could take well, maybe this messes with our schedule. Could we take 5 minutes just to make sure it's
my
problem?
my recording says 6 hours, 1 minute and 5 seconds, 6 seconds.
I think it's fine, but I don't know.
Do you want to take a break to check, or do you want to proceed?
I'd like to make sure it's being recorded.
I heard my name. Sorry, I had to pop out for a second. It is still being recorded. This is Sean Gilbertson.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you heard my name because I have to thank you for setting this up and doing the process that we need.
You're welcome.
Let's proceed then with Mr. Vogel. I did have his
Okay.
resume in front of me, and now I can't find it.
Okay, I call Mr. William Vogel to the stand. And Mr. Vogel, you'll have to start with an oath.
Did I swear in Ms. Stone?
I don't think we've sworn him in yet.
No, but Ms. Stone.
Oh, yes, you did. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
Mr. Vogel, I see you raising your right hand. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vogel. Can you spell your name for the record?
William, William, Vogel, Vogel.
What is your vocation?
I'm a certified wildlife biologist.
Can you describe a little bit of your education background related to wildlife biology?
Sure. I have a bachelor's and a master's from Montana State University in Fish and Wildlife Management, 1981 and 83, and numerous additional trainings in the past 40 plus years.
Okay, can you describe your work experience and any other details about your background that might be helpful for the examiner to be aware of?
Sure. Early in my career, I spent several years conducting research on big game and waterfowl. I was then a federal employee for 39.5 years. I worked for the U.S. Forest Service, Department of Energy, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I spent 36 years with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, including 6 years in Washington, D.C., and the last 30 years in Washington State. My 30 years of experience here was primarily in the arena of Endangered Species Act, including habitat conservation plans, Section 10 of the Act, Section 7, consultation with federal agencies, and under Section 4, designation of critical habitat. I also had a number of special assignments over the years. For instance, I was the Washington State Alternate Energy Coordinator for a while for the federal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and worked on regional and national efforts regarding wind energy and wildlife. I was the NEPA coordinator for the National Office of Migratory Bird Management in DC. And here in Washington State, I oversaw the preparation of several environmental impact statements and a number of environmental assessments as part of the Habitat Conservation Planning Program, HCPs. I wrote the supplemental and final EISs for the modification of the Central Cascades HCP to accommodate the I-90 land exchange. I've written several NEPA records of decision, completed many Section 7 consultations, including some of the largest and most complex biological opinions produced by this office in the last 30 years, such as the Forest Practices Rules, which covered 9.1 million acres, various consultations on the Elwha Dam removal activities, the Kalama methanol plant, the state trust lands, and USDA Wildlife Services, their 10-year statewide activities, and Olympic National Park's 10-year fire management plan. Most of my work in the last 30 years dealt with assessment of effects to wildlife and ways to minimize and mitigate those effects.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vogel's CV is Exhibit 64. Mr. Examiner. Mr. Vogel, are you familiar with the Port of Olympia's 2021 Master Plan update that's the subject of this appeal?
Yes, I reviewed the master plan update to understand any analysis of wildlife and understand the proposed actions, specifically the preferred alternative.
And so you're familiar with the preferred alternative in Chapter 4 of the plan?
Yes.
And have you reviewed the SEPA MDNS and the environmental checklist that was prepared by the port for the master plan update?
Yes.
Did you also prepare a report about this project for this
Yes.
appeal? All right, Mr. Examiner, that is Exhibit 54, I'm sorry, 53.
Yeah.
And yeah, would you like to comment on your report at all?
Yeah, I just want to mention that it's a short memorandum and it's merely a summary of the type of effects anticipated, that assessing the various actions and the potential wildlife on the potential wildlife that could be affected would need to be far more complete than my memo.
Okay. Looking at, let's see, I'm going to call up Exhibit 54. Oops. Mr. Examiner, this is the bush prairie habitat plan that we were talking about earlier. I'm going to share it.
Which exhibit is that? 54?
Exhibit 54. Oh, I'm sorry, 53. 53. No, 54. Gosh, I'm looking at different notes.
You know, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure I've seen this when I was reviewing documents, but so I'm trying to find it.
It's over 300 pages long, so if you were printing exhibits out, there might have been a hesitation to print this because it's such a big document, but it was in the electronic. We sent a share file link of all the electronic documents, and it was in that link.
Well,
But I'd be
no, that's a good point. I certainly want to look at it, but you proceed now with your questions, and I'll just have to make notes.
okay, and I'm happy to send it in a link if it hasn't shown up on your end.
That would be helpful. I don't need it right now immediately.
Okay. Mr. Vogel, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Can you describe what this is?
Yes, this is a version of the draft Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan that was made available for review in February of 2023, almost 2.5 years ago. And what this is, the ESA prohibits the take of species that are listed as threatened or endangered unless it's authorized under either a Section 7 consultation or a Section 10, what we call incidental take permit, or a Section 4 special rule. An HCP like this serves as the basis for an application for an incidental take permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service pursuant to the Act. This proposed HCP would address effects on local species covered by the Endangered Species Act from otherwise lawful construction at and ongoing management and operation of the airport property. So the port would get a permit for all development and activities at the airport that would harm or injure listed species. And this HCP is a necessary part of that voluntary application package for a permit. And it describes the impacts to wildlife as well as the steps to minimize and mitigate those impacts. It's also supposed to talk about the alternatives that were considered and any additional measures that may be required. So my understanding is the port, they desire to have this permit to facilitate and allow them to lawfully move forward with development and operation and maintenance at the airport.
Okay, and what does Bush Prairie Habitat refer to?
Okay, it's the historical name of the prairie on which the Olympia Regional Airport is now located. Very little of the historical prairies remain in the South Puget Sound region, with only a small portion remaining as high quality prairies. WDFW estimates that only 3% of the original prairies remain. And much of what remains is in smaller, more isolated patches than the historical pattern. And many habitat remnants suffer from invasive plants and other degradation.
Okay, and you focus on 4 species of wildlife in your report that will be impacted by the adoption of the airport master plan: the Mazama pocket gopher, the streaked horn lark, the Oregon spotted frog, and the Oregon vesper sparrow. Will you give us a little background about the Mazama pocket gopher?
Sure. The Mazama pocket gopher is a keystone species of the Puget Sound Prairie. It's listed as threatened by Washington State, and the Fish and Wildlife Service listed 4 subspecies of the Mazama pocket gopher as threatened, including the Olympia pocket gopher, which is found only in Thurston County, mainly in the city of Tumwater and some areas south of the city. The largest area known to be occupied by the Olympia pocket gopher is the airport. There are crude estimates, but they're really crude, of perhaps 2,000 to 5,000 individuals. The airport supports the largest and most important source population of the Olympia pocket gopher within the range of the subspecies, and contains the habitat identified as essential for the species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that's called critical habitat.
Is it inhabited year-round by these Mazama pocket gopher? Do they live there all year?
Yes.
Okay.
They don't go very far, as I think I heard some of the Betsy's testimony and questions. They don't go very far at all. The young of the year then leave and go a little bit further. Not long distances, but maybe within 100 yards. They create new tunnels, and that's their method of dispersal and sort of, trying to get their genetics spread around.
And you said it was a keystone species. What does keystone species mean?
Sure. That's a little bit like a beaver. They build dams that provide habitat used by a whole bunch of other species and contribute to the ecosystem. Olympia pocket gophers, through turning over the soil and creating disturbance at the surface, break up the vegetation that might normally be there and allow pioneering species. So it can break up a solid area of grassland and allow some of the camas and other prairie species to establish. And so
Okay,
they're contributing to the conservation of these other prairie species around them.
I see. And will you give us a little background about the streaked horned lark?
Sure. It's the streaked horned lark is listed as endangered by Washington State, and it's federally listed as threatened. The breeding range of the streaked horned lark has contracted substantially over time. Both the areas in the north and south have become unoccupied. Its habitat currently includes dredge deposition islands in the lower Columbia River, some coastal dune habitats off the coast of Washington, grasslands in the Puget Trough prairies, and some agriculture and grasslands in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. This small songbird's habitat is almost bare to sparsely vegetated land. Range-wide in Washington and Oregon, population numbers are likely between 1,000 and 1,600. Again, those are crude estimates, but very low in the Puget Trough prairies, and perhaps only 30 to 40 breeding pairs at the Olympia Airport. But that's a little bit old information. It's the recent trends has been fluctuating and unstable in recent years. The airport, though, has the only nesting population of streaked horned larks in Thurston County that I know of. And maybe I can clarify some of the confusion earlier. The Olympia Airport was identified by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as essential scientifically early in the process of designating critical habitat. But the Fish and Wildlife Service, through the Secretary of Interior, can and should apply these things called exemptions for economic and partnership reasons. So for the streaked horned lark, the exemption of military lands on JBLM combined with the exclusion under what they call Section 4B2 of the Act, which is for non-federal airports, resulted in the removal of all of Unit 1 in its entirety, including the Olympia Airport. So the remaining critical habitat designated in Washington is on the sand dunes on the beaches and some of the islands in the Columbia River. It's not that this habitat wasn't essential. It's just that it fit the criteria for the exclusion, and so you don't see it in the final rule, and you don't see it on any of the maps.
Okay, and that's regarding the habitat for the streaked horned lark, but not the status of the animal itself, the species itself. There's a distinction there. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's only the designation of the critical habitat, and it doesn't imply that habitat is less important. It only implies that for other reasons it was excluded. And so for JBLM, it falls under a military exclusion, but it might also have fallen under the exclusion of having an adequate management plan through the military's process.
And is that an exclusion just for hazard air flight only? But
I do not know the reason that there was a non-federal airports exclusion. My
Okay.
suspicion would be the only agency affected would primarily be FAA, and perhaps the service felt that working in partnership with the airports was better than designating critical habitat.
so would you, if this is addressed in the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan, the details around this, do you believe they would probably describe this exclusion in there? I mean, we could
No.
defer to the, no?
I don't think so.
Okay,
They just, because they weren't designated, they may just say, we're not designated as critical habitat.
okay.
Yeah,
All right, and can you give us some background about the Oregon Vesper sparrow?
sure. It's also has a restricted breeding range, and due to habitat loss and degradation, it's in danger of being extirpated from the state of Washington, with approximately 300 remaining in the state. It's listed as endangered by the state of Washington. It has not been listed by been listed federally yet. It again has habitat characterized by short, sparse vegetation such as prairies of sufficient size. And most of the Oregon Vesper sparrows in Washington occur in Puget Trough prairies, primarily on JBLM, 90% of them, but it has also occurred at the Olympia Airport.
What's JBLM?
Joint Base Lewis McChord.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And background about the Oregon spotted frog.
Yeah, it was a candidate starting back in like 1997, and then it was listed in 2013 or 2014. It has a very restricted breeding range, and it's highly aquatic. It's our most aquatic frog. It's listed as endangered by the state and is federally threatened. It lays clusters of eggs in February and March in water that is usually less than 6 inches deep and in areas where solar radiation can warm the water. In Washington, it's found primarily in Thurston County, in the Trout Lake Convoy area, and in Whatcom and Skagit counties. It is found in Hopkins Ditch and Salmon Creek south of the airport and within the Black River Basin. In terms of numbers, I know some years ago, Dempsey Creek had somewhere between 500 and 800. I was fairly familiar with those trends. Some additional sites have been found in recent years, especially within the Black River watershed, which now that subbasin population is, it's fragmented, but we found up to 13 isolated local populations.
And did you perform an assessment of wildlife impacts?
Yes, I performed a cursory assessment of wildlife effects anticipated from the preferred alternative. As I said earlier, an assessment of effects to meet environmental compliance and public disclosure would need to be, much more detailed and quantified. For instance, I only make a passing reference to contaminants, whereas concerns about the various contaminants, would need to be far more specific and thorough. For instance, you would need to talk about fire retardant, aviation fuel, de-icing chemicals, automotive and aircraft waste and maintenance chemicals, and of course 6 ppd and 6 ppdq from vehicle tires. And I didn't do any of that. I just referred to contaminants.
And what are the different categories of impacts to wildlife as you saw them from this project, or from this preferred alternative?
Yeah, so in general, you see these kind of impacts a lot. There's what we call direct injury, which can include death, harassment, habitat removal, indirect effects, facilitated effects, and cumulative effects.
And what are the direct injury impacts that you see from adoption of the preferred alternative?
Yeah, direct injury can include crushing nests, collisions with equipment, vehicles, and infrastructure, collapsing burrows, and other similar effects to species we're talking about that directly result in injury or death.
And when we talk about these impacts, we're talking about all 4 of these species that you just described?
When I'm talking about direct effects, there's various potentials for different species. So for instance, the Oregon spotted frog is not located on the airport. So really the only potential effect that could occur to Oregon spotted frogs in terms of direct injury and death would occur from mitigation. If there was some mitigation proposed off-site and they were trying to improve habitat for the frog or perhaps develop habitat for one of the other species and it involves heavy equipment, that could result in. But since the Oregon spotted frog does not occur on the airport, there would not normally be direct effects.
So, but the other 3, there would be, the remaining 3?
There's a likelihood of that, yes.
And what are that was your first category is direct injury. Your second category was harassment. What are the harassment impacts of the adoption of the preferred alternative?
Yeah, harassment is when an action annoys a species to the extent that it creates a likelihood of injury through interruption of essential behaviors, such as territorial and mating displays, provisioning nests, eggs, and chicks, as well as feeding and sheltering. So, for instance, if a street-horned lark cannot sit on her eggs, they'll become cold and die, or they'll be subject to predation, or she may just be so annoyed that she just abandons the nesting attempt.
Okay, and again, these are generally impacts that could occur to the 3 species that are on the airport property?
Yes, but probably more likely to the birds, a little less likely to the gophers.
Okay. And what are the habitat removal impacts of the preferred alternative?
Habitat removal can remove habitat for foraging, sheltering, and or breeding, thereby, increasing the chance of death and failure to reproduce. It can also adversely affect the size, shape, and proximity of the remaining habitat patches, reducing the ability of individuals to persist and the number of persisting individuals in the long term.
And these again are for those 3 species that inhabit the airport property.
Yeah, and so, for instance, habitat removal, if the habitat is occupied, has a very direct effect, and it is, prohibited by the Endangered Species Act and so forth. But habitat removal can have effects even if it's unoccupied, because it's removing the ability of dispersing animals to reoccupy those lands. So there are adverse effects that can be occurring even if no take is occurring.
And then you also said there would be indirect habitat effects. What are those?
Well, these are the kind of effects that manifest themselves later in time or farther removed in distance due to intervening processes. So, for instance, impervious surface will increase runoff, and such runoff could affect burrows adjacent to the site for the Olympia pocket gopher. If the airport's ability to handle stormwater is overwhelmed or groundwater dynamics changed, more rapid or greater changes in water level downstream in the early spring can leave Oregon spotted frog eggs stranded, leading to desiccation, drying out and or freezing, or lead to deeper water, which is too cold and inhibits embryo development. So, but these effects occur further away or they occur later. So that's why we refer to them as indirect.
And would the indirect habitat effects affect the birds, the 2 bird species?
Yeah, they could. An example might be, we were talking earlier about moving the taxiways. If the fences were moved, you might be, let's say the fences were moved closer in to the newer taxiways. The intervening land that was fenced in that's now not would probably lead to greater access by coyotes or by dogs running loose. And that could result in predation on the Olympia pocket gopher.
Okay. And then your another effect you characterized as facilitated effect. What is a facilitated effect and what could those be?
So it's a kind of effect like where you might see an interstate having a new I was trying to think of interchange, exit and on and off ramp put in, and somebody might say, well, it's only the effects of that additional concrete being laid or whatever, but facilitated effects might be the development of a commercial property, of a truck stop, things like that, that are very closely linked. So in this case, the development at the airport, as a result of the preferred alternative, is likely to spur additional commerce, industrial, and storage facilities in the surrounding areas. And this would also increase traffic on local roads and eventually result in modification and expansion of the local road systems and supporting infrastructure. And such development would not only affect the species we've been talking about, but it would compromise essential habitats for other species. For instance, the connectivity corridors in portions of the county south of the airport that right now are a focus by Washington State Department of Transportation and WDFW in their current efforts for the I-5 connectivity. They refer to it as the Northern Linkage Zone. So this facilitated development spreads and will be impacting a whole variety of species.
Okay. And the final subject that you mentioned were cumulative effects. What are the cumulative effects of the preferred alternative to wildlife in the area?
Yeah, I'm talking about two different things there when I talk about cumulative effects. On the one hand, cumulative effects are the effects on the environment, which results from the incremental effects of the action when added to the effects of other past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future actions, regardless of who's doing those actions. And this also allows for the consideration of the context of the effects, enabling an assessment of the interactions between the effects of the analyzed actions. In this case, there are already tremendous development effects occurring in Thurston County, especially south of Tumwater. Large warehouse facilities are being constructed, residential developments are being built, and infrastructure improvements are occurring. So clearly, activities proposed under the master plan will interact with ongoing and reasonably foreseeable activities to result in these cumulative effects. And climate change, invasive plant and animal species have the potential and likelihood of degrading existing prairie habitats, thereby magnifying the effects that occur on, nearby, and downstream, as well as in those other county habitats important for connectivity we talked about. But on the other hand, the term cumulative effects also refers more directly to the combination of impacts caused by all of the development that is foreseeable within the adoption of the preferred alternative.
Is in this case, are you familiar with the approach by the environmental checklist and the approach taken by the port with respect to their plan to not conduct any environmental review now and instead defer it to a project by project basis? Is that you're familiar with the environmental checklist, correct?
Yes.
And did you see that as far as their answer to wildlife impacts?
It was the same as most other questions, which was, we're going to do that at some point in the future on a case-by-case basis.
Is that an effective way to consider cumulative effects of wildlife impacts?
No. Now, the most devastating environmental effects may result not from the direct effects of any particular action, but from the combination of individually adverse effects of multiple actions over time. Cumulative effects may result from the accumulation of similar effects, but also the synergistic interaction of different effects. So maybe as an example, you could have the combined effects of discharging warmer water, and another project may be discharging water with higher nutrient levels. And together, they have a completely additional effect of eutrophication. For wildlife, one example might be having smaller habitat patches with more edge, therefore, less interior habitat from one project and additional sources of disturbance from another. It's important to assess the effects of all the projects, at least preliminarily, under the preferred alternative at the time it's being considered, in order to make improved decisions before it's too late. So, for instance, what if the total acres removed from all projects is too severe for a population of a given species, or if the total effects of all projects cannot be adequately mitigated. Now would be the time to decide which project should move forward rather than allowing less important projects to proceed first and then precluding other development projects by default. It would be much better to do an analysis and make an intelligent decision about what should be moving forward first.
And has the port adequately considered the impacts on wildlife from the adoption of their master plan update?
No, not that I could tell. In the master plan update, MDNS and the checklist, the port did not conduct any analysis of wildlife impacts at all. The port has not provided sufficient information addressing the probable impacts to support an MDMS for the master plan update that I could find. They said by itself it would not result in impacts to wildlife, but I could find no evidence that it would not. Again, all I saw is that it said it would evaluate impacts to wildlife on a case-by-case basis at some future time when site-specific projects are proposed.
And in your professional opinion, will the adoption of the master plan update cause significant adverse effects to wildlife?
Yeah, it would result in a series of actions and projects that alone and together will have probable significant adverse effects on wildlife and their habitat. Killing and harming and effectively eliminating critical habitat of threatened and endangered species can be characterized as a significant adverse impact. The proposed Bush Prairie HCP explicitly anticipates that the airport would kill, harm, and take these species. And the port's own consultant, ICF, recommends inclusion of the 4 species we've been talking about due to the probability of harm and injury under the Endangered Species Act. And whether or not the significant adverse effects are authorized or not, they should be considered and evaluated at this time when this can be done cumulatively in the most effective way. The HCP or biological opinion with FAA and associated documents can always be going into additional detail later.
Okay, and there's been some disagreement over what this project is, and the port has argued that they are only planning to realign taxiways and make modifications to the runway. Do you believe that there will be significant adverse impacts just from those taxiway runway changes to wildlife?
Yes, the new taxiways would remove habitat, and that's a substantial adverse effect right there. Also, the removal of existing taxiways and shortening of runways will disturb habitat, but may also result in disposal of contaminated soil and asphalt in other locations. And then I think, as Betsy alluded to a little bit, moving the taxiways will also facilitate movement of the fences, which for some species like the Olympia pocket gopher may leave important habitat outside fences, and for other species like the streaked horned lark may move fences closer to nesting habitat, which would facilitate perching of predatory birds, and in both cases it could result in more predation for these species. And moving fences may also facilitate, and the taxiways and runways facilitate additional development in adjacent areas that would affect species, having a layout that right now would not allow that additional development.
Okay, unless you have anything else, I have no further questions.
Mr. Vogel, remain in place. Don't change your habitat. We're going to try to figure out how to proceed. Mr. Pierce-Wright, do you want to begin cross-examination now, or is that going to, if it's going to take you, I scheduled till 4:30. We can go to 4:30 and go a little later, or we could get done earlier. Starting up tomorrow might discomfort everyone, including Mr. Vogel. But do you have a preference for how to proceed at this point?
My preference would be to get it done all in one go and to start that tomorrow.
Ms. Newman?
What was, I couldn't hear what Mr.
I
Wright's.
think his preference, and I have some questions, is to start up with Mr. Vogel again tomorrow morning.
Okay,
Oh.
that's fine.
Mr. Vogel, are you available?
If he's available.
Are you available at 9:30 tomorrow morning?
I have a conflict, but it's not as important as this proceeding, so I would skip the other conflict.
Okay, I won't ask you what it is. I apologize for having to reschedule, but we'll resume again at 9:30 tomorrow. You'll be cross-examined. I have a few questions for you also. I have no idea how long it will take, but we can begin with you tomorrow morning then again. Let me ask the attorneys. We can begin at 9:30 then tomorrow morning, and I have Mr. Gilbertson still on, I see. I know I've scheduled this for, I have two issues in my mind on scheduling. We don't have to address it now, but I want you to think about it. One is that I scheduled through the end of Friday this week. For other reasons, I am trying to see if I can free up Friday. I don't know if that is going to present a problem for the attorneys, for either party. And my thinking is that Ms. Newman, if you could come tomorrow with one or more suggested dates for your other expert, it may be that we could also maybe schedule some other witnesses for that day, and it would not need Friday. But I don't need an answer from you folks now. I just want you to think about it and if that will cause you problems. And the other parties in the, I didn't ask port staff or some of the other people whether that's going to cause problems for them. But if you could think about that, maybe a schedule change, and then dates. We're going to need one day, if not maybe a day and a half after this week, I think. We can deal with that first thing tomorrow morning, not take up too much Mr. Vogel's time, but at least discuss it. Does anyone have any issue with that or any suggestion right now? Okay.
I have no objection to considering it tomorrow, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Well, I know it changes schedules around, but I mean, I can stick with Friday. It's going to present a problem for me, but I set the date. So if I can move that and the people would appear then to the date Ms. Newman has for her other witness, then I think that could work. So if there's no other matters or questions now, I appreciate everyone's patience. And does anyone have any questions or comments before we end today and then resume again tomorrow morning at 9:30?
I do not.
Not from the port, thank you, Mr. Examiner.
Okay,
Not from
I
before.
have to, I don't want to over extol the lawyers, but thank you for your civil behavior in moving this along. I know it's slow, it's a complicated subject and involves a lot of moving parts, but not presenting a lot of obstreperous behavior. Any obstreperous behavior has been helpful. So if I don't hear anything further, let's resume again at 9:30 again tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.